who will be participating in this evening's deliberation. We had fair discussion for the last 2 days, and we realized that
घंटी को बंद कर लो
Indian culture,
बड़े जोर से
though pretty
वाइब्रेशन
old
कर दो काट देना
and sublime,
नहीं तो जोर से
there
छोड़
have
देना
been, in the course of time, several
जो भी होगा ना डिस्टर्बेंस
deviations
बस
and
करने में ही होगी
distortions, and
डिस्टर्बेंस
therefore there is a need to revisit,
वाइब्रेशन कर दो
understand,
वाइब्रेशन हाँ
reinterpret the sublime Indian culture and try to diagnose the causes which have led to deformities in our rich tradition, and how to uh, undertake remedial measures. So both the diagnosis and the remedy are needed because if we look to Indian society of present time, particularly the Hindu society, we find that all is not well, and an in-depth analysis is required. Lord Buddha just pointed out that there is a cause of suffering, but there is also a removal of suffering, and there is a way for that removal, and therefore for all ills and evils of present day Hindu society, they have a causal origin, they are human made, and therefore it is human responsibility, particularly it is responsibility of those who know, who are exposed to rich Indian culture, to point out as to where we have gone wrong, and how we can improve upon the present situation for the benefit of not only the Hindus or the Indians, but also the humanity at large. Therefore, we always have talked of Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya. So how
નામ આવે તો જોઈન મારું કેમ નથી આવતું કઈ
તમારું અહીંયા દેખાશે
I think some disturbance is there.
એ તો અહીંયા આવે ફલાણા જોઈન કર્યું ફલાણા જોઈન કર્યું
Patel mute करिए.
વિકલ્પ
Vimal Vatva, please mute.
So yes, sir. We have the concluding session wherein we shall not only sum up our deliberations, but also point out as to we should go ahead from henceforth, and as Gopiji and others also suggested, we should have periodical meetings and take up one particular issue at a time, and try to find out the causal conditions which gave rise to that particular problem, and also the remedial measures we have to undertake. We have to be realistic. We have to be pragmatic. We have to be practical. Mere theoretical analysis won't do. Well, that is needed to provide a foundation, a sound logical basis, but that's not enough. Knowledge without conduct is barren and futile, and therefore we must emphasize on practical application as to how, with our knowledge drawn from the Vedic tradition, can help us in removing all problems that we are facing. Problems physical, problems mental, problems intellectual, and also problem spiritual. Spiritual, because we are suffering from exhaustion of spirit. We have restarted religion of which spirituality is the core, but then we have confined religion to rites and rituals and all sorts of superstitions. Well, in our tradition, Guru has a very significant role, but now we have mushroom of gurus, and they are all fake and fictitious. They are not genuine gurus. And therefore, we have to exercise a judicious discrimination who is a real guru, Sadguru, and who is not a Sadguru. So, the role of guru also needs to be examined now, and qualifications of a particular guru. And we had a long guru tradition in every part of our country. And those gurus did give us direction for the betterment of our life, individual life, social life, family life, social life, national life, and cosmic life as well. So we have to revisit those gurus and make use of their wisdom. So with these preliminary remarks, now I would request Professor Sebastian to make his presentation. Professor Sebastian, I think, Gopiji, you please introduce him. Of course, he needs no introduction. As a philosopher, as a scholar, because very recently he brought out 2 books within a course of a year. He keeps on writing, and he is well steeped in both Indian and Western tradition. I'm particularly grateful to him because when I visited Washington, D.C., it was he who was my guide. I remember that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So,
Yes, sir, thank
yeah. So, Professor Gautam Patel, I hope that he has already joined. I hope he will stay with us till the end of the session.
I think so.
Therefore, he can participate in our last, Yeah. Similarly, Professor Balram Singh also joined. I don't know if he has left or not. He also, I hope he will be with us till the end of the...
I think he will join.
He will join. So, as you rightly pointed out, Professor Sebastian needs no special introduction because he is known to all the academic community, especially the academic community of philosophy in India and abroad also. And I understand that he has written more than 10 books and a large number of 13. 13. 13. That also very reputed publishers have published it, and a large number of research papers. And that way, in Indian philosophy, his contribution, as Bhatt pointed out, is commendable. And he is a very close associate of Shantigiri movement. And he visits very often Shantigiri and get inspired. And that way also, he transcending barriers by religion, this or that. His vision is very widened. So let me request him to make his presentation. Thank you, Professor Sebastian.
Thank you, Professor Gopi. Respected Professor Bhatt. In fact, Bhatt would promoted me as a professor in this department years back. Okay. And Professor Kumaratnam, Professor Paneerselvam, Professor Gopi, and my dear friends. Well, when I was asked by Professor Gopi to somehow talk about Yuga Dharma, I was in a, in a different mood. I was just thinking about the possibility of 2 things. One is there any relation between Yuga and Dharma? That is to say, time and morality or Dharma. Now, the thing is that maybe to substantiate my point of view, I would like to somehow take a recourse to maybe first of all, what is the time, especially as it is understood by the Western philosophers. I think when we go to the Western philosophy, there are 2 opposing points of view with regard to time. That is, one pertains to Parmenides and the other Heraclitus. As far as Parmenides is concerned, he maintained that the ultimate reality is always timeless. Whereas in the case of Heraclitus, he claims that the world is the totality of events and not of things. And when of course, the students of philosophy know pretty well that, it is St. Augustine who rather somehow gave a very clear understanding about what is time. Okay, I'm not coming to that. I mean, I'm not going to that level anyway. But what I wanted to say is something different from the Western philosophy. If the Greeks conceived of time as the life of being, the classical India, I think to my understanding, they understood or what they perceived time as the life birth of reality. This is the point which I wanted to somewhat talk about. One is about the life of being, as far as the Greeks are concerned. Whereas once you come to the classical India, they somehow perceive time as the life birth of reality. Therefore, in classical Indian philosophers, they always contended that it is time that matures beings and encompasses things. That's why, or I would say, in the classical Indian philosophers, for them, time is the Lord who works change in beings. Rather, I can say, time created earth. In time is consciousness. And in a more explicit way, they say that time is life, that it is a prana. So, the Vedic seers, once you go to the Vedic seers, time is born with a sacrifice. And it is by sacrifice that it is once again destroyed. This concept is rooted, but on the intimate relation between worship and time. Therefore, there is a concomitant relation between worship and time. And therefore, it provides us with a key to the understanding of the central place of sacrifice and man's participation in the unfolding of time. What I wanted to say is that, time and reality, belong together. And the experience of time amounts to the experience of reality. That's why, maybe, of course, the philosophers, especially the Indian philosophers, they know about it. Vatsab is here. According to, therefore, Bhartrhari, Bhartrhari will say, time is the most important power of the Brahman, Kaya Shakti, or power of time is a creative power of Kartra Shakti. Therefore, Bhartrhari argues that time is a cooperative cause. To say, Sakakari Karanam of everything. It is further, again, he says that it is the operation of the machine called the cosmos. So, time is the operation of the machine called the cosmos. So now, why I was talking about this part of time, because you see, I wanted to somehow talk about, why I wanted to somehow mix about, the connection between either, dharma and yoga. The way which we think about dharma, especially if a particular yoga has a particular dharma, now I think we may have to somehow, just as Professor Bhatt just said, we may have to reappropriate, re-understand, review, and rethink about this connect. What is the connect? See, let me take a course again Western philosophy once more. I think in the history of Western philosophy, to my understanding, I can be corrected anyway, there are only two serious philosophers who talked about about being. One is Aristotle, other one is Martin Heidegger. As far as Aristotle is concerned, what is being as being? And whereas for Heidegger is concerned, what is the meaning of being? Now, why I am taking recourse to this Aristotelian or Heideggerian conception is that we may have to understand here about what is dharma as dharma and what is the meaning of dharma. Okay. And here I would say, I would like to pose three questions. To approximate the exactitude of meaning, which I wanted to somewhat talk about. Okay. What is the meaning of dharma to me in this 21st century? I say that there are three questions which come to my mind. One is, who is the other? How do I relate with him or her? Or in the contemporary context, do I relate with the other and what are the consequences derived from them? Looking from the Indian tradition, I think maybe I would say, maybe the most authentic value which I am trying to talk about is something to do with what to say, humanization, of societies. A true humanization to my understanding. Of course, I am somehow using I mean, I'm taking a different concept, different understanding about the concept of dharma as humanization of society and individual. So true humanization, I mean, it is, it is based on, I think, three things to me. One is the unity, other one is the harmony, and third one is the integration. Therefore, to be humanized means to be in harmony with the nature, with the fellow men, and also with the transcendent. If I am, harmonized with the nature, with my fellow men, and understand him, and step to his shoes, and appreciate him, and I think, therefore, fellow men, the transcendent God, and of course, even to myself. Okay, so therefore, to be in harmony means, it is a kind of maybe from an existential standpoint, I can say it's an I-thou relation with the nature, not I-it. Okay, with the fellow men and also with the transcendent. So what is the point of which I'm trying to say that now? One cannot have a truly humanized social life if it is if you are confined merely to one's own family and country, while millions in the world are poor and starving. So this view of humanization is in the realm of the soft cultural field, I believe. I think, just as Professor Bhatt just now said, we may have to see, there are many things in this tradition, in this culture, okay, which are not what to say, humanized. Although, we the Indians, we are said to have a long tradition of pluralistic culture in terms of religions, philosophies, languages, and lifestyles. Yet, I believe that we are a group of people who have been bound down by, the authority of Smriti, Acharya, Dharma Shastras, Dharma Sutras, and, in such a way, and which enabled the Indian societies to develop a philosophy of exclusion to certain people anyway. Of course, it's a fact. Let us not forget about that. So the traditional social value of Varna Dharma, which has been operating, the social consciousness of this country, resulted to a segregation of a majority of people in the hierarchy pattern of social estrangement, restricted the interaction between, therefore, individuals belonging to various groups. Therefore, the result was what? The age-old Indian concept of dharma, which was interpreted in terms of Varnashrama dharma by Banu, Prashastapata and Kautilya, seldom provided a place for the majority of people, or at least a group of people, okay, who were called Shudras or whatever it may be, and later metamorphosed as Dalits. I think in terms of, realization, this has been reflected in the various Hindu literatures, which have denied accessibility to, to a group of people. The effect was that, we have even philosophy, or the reduction of Anmishi or philosophy, it was reserved only for a higher caste of people. So I think when we think about the re-meaning of dharma, I think here we have to get rid of many kinds of things which have been using the term dharma. See, even the dharma, to my understanding, I don't know, I can be correct anyway. See, it is not only metaphysical ought, it's an ethical ought. What happened was that, in the course of history, or in the course of our history, what is being practiced has become the ought. Though the ought is always eternal, okay. The eternal, or the ought, has been, simplified as what is being practiced. Therefore, what that is being practiced has become the ought, and the ought actually lost its the eternal value. So another thing which I wanted to say is that, Indian cultural identity, or the cultural identity of this country, is espoused through the concept of dharma, because the metaphysical basis of Indian culture, Indian ethics, Indian politics, and even natural law imply the underlying principle of dharma, which preserves society from going to pieces. Therefore, what I am trying to suggest is that now dharma is understood as the law of human progress and the foundational idea of human life. And if you understand this aspect of it, I mean, dharma is the law of human progress. I mean, yesterday I think Professor Bhatt was talking about that now. Dharma is that which sustains life, not only human life. Okay, it is the entire cosmos. Therefore, maybe in my language, I should put it that no, it is the cosmicization of the humans and the humanization of the cosmos. In the sense that no, if I am able to, dharma is that it sustains not only the human life, but the entire life, the entire cosmos. So this is the sacrality of it. Therefore, now, yes, I have, I think 5 more minutes, I believe. Yes. Professor Gopi?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, you have 5 more minutes.
Yeah. Now, when we think about the history of India, I would say that no, Indian history is a perpetual tension and battle between the moral, the idealistic, and spiritual forces symbolized by the idea of dharma and the forces of darkness and evil that embodied the idea of adharma. Hence, I would like to interpret in this level that no, history can be understood. The Indian history can be understood as the progressive endeavor of the idealization and glorification of dharma in individual, collective, and spiritual life and experience. So now, mistakenly, somehow in the course of history, we were made to believe that, rather, dharma is practically limited to the duties of various varnas and later metamorphosed into innumerable jadis. Therefore, dharma was limited to the scrupulous pursuit of hereditary occupations. Practically what happened was that, while emphasizing the prescriptive rules and customs, I think our people, maybe the people who have been the custodians of the dharma, did not carefully analyze the ethical implications of the concept of dharma and its moral grounding. This is where we have lost something. Therefore, dharma became, a system of injunctions and prohibitions in order to ensure the harmonious functioning of the various elements in the life of the community. What we have lost sight is the ideal of social development or abhyudaya, and what we have upholding was the social status of various jadis. So now, this is, I think, a kind of, rectification. Well, when we come to Guru, Karnavara Guru, of course, I have an emotional bond with Shantigiri for the last maybe 12, 13 years. Okay. So, Guru somehow talks about 2 kinds of tradition. One is the, what is that? The Guru Shishya Parampara or the wisdom tradition. And other one is the, the Haindava culture, we can say, Haindava culture. And the Guru Shishya Parampara, okay, the Guru means the one who dispels darkness. Of course, just as Professor Bhatt just now said, no, if you go to UP, you can say more than 700 ashrams. So-called gurus are there, but they are not gurus. To say, Guru is the one who is what? Guru is actually, Brahma Chaitana, okay. From Atma Bhavana to Brahma Bhavana to Brahmatma Bhavana to Brahmatma Darshana to Yagatma Darshana. This is what, of course, I talk about what is the Guru. Therefore, the Guru is the one, and of course, we have great gurus like Yajnavalkya of Pragadana Upanishads, Udara Irony of Chandogya Upanishads, and we have Brahmarshis, we have Kaikaya. There are not many people. So the thing is that in the course of history, what we have lost is that the one tradition, maybe the Deva tradition, just as Kannar Guru speaks, they were concerned only about Nishrayas or the liberation of the self rather than the Abhyudaya. So we have lost the social development. Okay. And when I think about even development, I think development means development, to my understanding, of course, it has 3 dimensions. One is the the productive power. Of course, now the Honorable Prime Minister speaks about Atmanirbhara. To self-rely in India needs, of course, productive power. But apart from the productive power, we need a deliverance power. To say emancipatory power. Okay. And third one is the spiritual power. So this emancipation emancipatory power and the spiritual power we can get it from the great ideal, like what to say, dharma. If I am able to reappropriate, re-understand, redefine the meaning of dharma in its 21st century level. So this is what I think this webinar is meant for. So, and one more thing I would say here, that of course earlier I was talking about three things. One is the unity, harmony, and integration. Now I would say the harmony of the world process can be preserved or is preserved when each thing remains true to dharma, and when we respect dharma of everything, or what to say, or every being. If I am able to respect the dharma of every being, and if everything remains true to its own dharma, then the world process, it can be, there's a wonderful integration can be happened. And maybe this conference, this webinar can enable us to, re-understand dharma in this level. So the practice of dharma consists in to my understanding, the awareness of the Yuga Dharma, and in a life that lives in consonance with this awareness. This convention suggests that dharma has, in a way, two aspects are there. One is the Sanatana Dharma, which is universal and eternal, and the Yuga Dharma, which is valid only for a particular age. And this Yuga Dharma, to me, maybe I may talk in terms of humanization. I may talk in terms of what to say, human dignity, and what to say, accept the other as the other. And I am sure that the operative part of dharma should not be unjust at all. This is what happened. Actually, this is the mistake which we have, we committed during the course of history. So the operative part. So as I mentioned earlier, it also presupposes the idea that one discovers oneself only by discovering one's relationship with the universe, with the other, with the nature. That's it. And I'm sure Guru, Karnagara Guru, somehow, of course, I have read something about, not at least 2-3 books about Karnagara Guru, and read something about, more about the so-called Guru Vani. So now my suggestion, my point of view is that, if you are, the dharma, it is not aspatial, it is not atemporal, it is in time. So the time we had to, what to say, just as Immanuel Kant speaks about, space and time are the a priori conditions of experience. So if I want to experience what is dharma, I think, it is only in time. And time matures beings, and time, what to say, in time only we can go forth. In time only we can develop, we can, grow. This is what, of course, I learned from Guru, Karnagara Guru, and of course, my, I'm not coming to the other things of anyway. So these are only some kind of the point which I have been trying to make it anyway. So thank you so much for your patient hearing, and especially I'm thankful to Professor Gopi for providing me this. Thank you so much. Bye.
So thank you very much to Professor Sebastian. You have journeyed through different realms of spirituality and religion and the Western thought system and Eastern thought system, and more veiled in philosophical, concepts. And however, your presentation merits a lot of appreciation because you actually, the core of Indian understanding, of dharma, time, you have very well brought out it. And so your observation that ultimate reality is timeless, quoting scriptures, very well pointed out. Ultimate reality is timeless. Time as the life breath of reality is Indian conception of time. So, and your concern is understandable to all, because it is our concern also. How Dharma as the odd principle in its pure sense, how it has been declined as in its operative part, how it has been deviated and declined. At present, the operative part is being projected, explained as Dharma, and this operative part has nothing to do with the Dharma, eternal cosmic will, which is to be translated into in our all social process, economic process, spiritual process. This is to be synthesized in our practical life. That is lost in course of time in Indian society. And that is why you talked of humanization process. Dharma is a humanization, it's a humanization progress. It is to live with the fellow beings in harmony. As again and again I am highlighting the name of Professor, but always he talks of this harmony, human harmony with the fellow beings, with the mother nature, with the cosmos. If this cannot be achieved through our life, then it is a disharmonious life. This disharmonious life creates all violence, wars, calamities, natural, everything is rooted in this disharmony, which is the bedrock of Western lifestyle also, not Western tradition, Western lifestyle also. So this is to be very well sorted out, and to make Dharma as the operative part of Indian life, we have to, as we discussed yesterday in the presence of Professor Balram Singh also, that our true Vedic wisdom reveals that higher level of Dharma, true Vedic wisdom. That wisdom is to be retrieved and reformulated, and it is scattered, and it is scattered in several scriptures. This is to be streamlined and put together with the not only help, it is our Dharma. It is our Dharma to do it. Apart from discoursing on the higher, and yesterday also when we concluded, but sir made that a relevant point. We need not to have more and more discourse on the theoretical part of, because we all are a little bit, well versed. Therefore, how it can be applied and how this, with the help of this, how can we address? So that way, Sebastian sir has, brought our attention, all our attention, highlighting the very practical, very realistic problems, issues, agonies that the contemporary society is passing through. You have very well brought out into limelight, and you need a lot of appreciation for this. I hope we all will be together in our ensuing endeavor and mission. Thank you, Professor Sebastian sir. And if anybody wants to make any comments or put questions.
I wish only to add to what Professor Sebastian has said. In Atharva Veda 1953:8 says, "Kalo hi sarvasya ishwaraha." Kalo hi sarvasya ishwaraha. That is, the time. And in Bhagavad Gita, in Vishwa Darshan Yoga, Arjun says, "Who are you?" And the Lord Krishna says, "Kalo osmi lokakshaya krita pravruddha." I am the time, So the factor of time is very important, right from Atharva Veda to Bhagavad Gita and onwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one or two points. Professor Sebastian has very rightly emphasized the significance of time in the cosmic process. Time is the efficient cause which molds entities in the cosmic process, which constitute the material cause. And efficient cause and material cause, they can be distinguished, but they cannot be separated. And therefore, it is the time which provides the requisite foundation for the cosmic process. And that's why Vishwanath said, Janyanam Janko Kalha Jagatam Ashrayo Mataha. And therefore, everything is within the control of time.
Yes.
Time, and therefore we have Sarvam Yasya Vashat Agata Kalaya Tasmai Namaha. So we bow down to Kal because we cannot escape the net of Kal. And we have to follow the Kal. And Bhartrhari therefore also said that Kalo na yataha vaimeva jataha. Time is eternal, imperishable. It's a constant flow. And we have just to be within that flow as a part of the flowing element. So importance of Kal is there, and it is the cluster of time which constitute Yuga. A particular segment will constitute one particular Yuga, and another segment will differentiate it from the previous one. So we have Satya, Yuga, Treta, Dwapar, etc. But one thing is there, the value schema is eternal. Dharma is Sanatana.
Yeah.
It won't differ from Yuga to Yuga. Only thing is the modalities differ. The way, for example, truth was adhered to in Satyuga, in the same way, truth is not adhered to in Treta, Dwapar, etc. This quantitative difference is there. Quality remains the same. The core of Satya remains the same, but the way we understand, the way we practice it, well, that differs. Its circumstances make this difference. Professor Sebastian has very rightly pointed out that dharma constitutes the very swabhava of an entity. Every entity has one's own swabhava, and it is our duty, it is our universal responsibility that the swabhava, our own swabhava, as well as swabhava of each and every one, is safeguarded, is preserved, and gets enhancement as well. So, and therefore, in this respect, we do not make a distinction between my swabhav and your swabhav, because we are all interrelated. And therefore, as he also referred to my earlier statement, well, we don't have in our culture a I-thou relationship concept. All we have is only I and we. I as a part and parcel of we. It's a holistic approach. We are just an organ in the totality of the organism, and therefore you have talked of integration. There is perfect integration, perfect harmony, perfect unity in the total organism, and so also in the total cosmos. The cosmos is an organic unity, wherein there is a differences, multiplicity coming out of unity. From ekoham bahusyam, one becomes so many, but the many also is related to one, is integrated in one, and therefore there is unity in multiplicity, and there is multiplicity in unity. Multiplicity issuing forth from unity, and that multiplicity being controlled and strengthened by the unifying principle. And there.
Namaste to everybody. Bhatt ji, Gopinath ji, Dave ji. So I am beginning with a Ved mantra. Om Agnimile Purohitam Yajjasya Devam Ratvijam Hotaram Ratnadhatamam Om. So we are discussing about Yoga Dharma. in the past. Kali. With this theme, we are under the impression that are we searching for something, some dharma? Dharma is a concept as per Vedic wisdom which carries us from one end to the other. It is like a boat. Dharmo dharayanti iti dharma. That holds one is dharma. So according to Manu, dhrati kshama damo aste shaucham indriya nigraha satyam akrodho dashakam dharma lakshanam. Dhi vidya satyam akrodho dashakam dharma lakshanam. These are the 10 features of dharma. So it means dharma is something which has to appear in one's life so that the person can just carry on his journey of soul easily, comfortably, and to the mission. And the question arises, what is our mission? What is the mission of this human life? When this Kali Yuga began, Shri Krishna, after Mahabharata was, 5 brothers, Pandav brothers, they came to Shri Krishna and asked a very simple question, common question. Sir, what would be the impressions of Kali Yuga? Shri Krishna was a yogi, so he told them and he recommended them, go and sit in meditation with this question. And then whatever dreams or whatever feelings you have in mind, you come to me morning. Next day morning, all the Pandavas approached Shri Krishna and told him, we have meditated long hours with this question, what would be the impressions of Kali Yuga? The first one, Yudhishthira, reported, I saw an elephant with 2 trunks. Shri Krishna gave his verdict on this observation. Elephant with 2 trunks means the kings of Kali Yuga, the politicians, the rulers, they would be elephants with 2 trunks. They would be eating right as well as they would be eating wrong also. They are deriving all benefits from the society in the name of law, legible their rights, and they are deriving all corruption money also. Second one, Arjuna observed a huge bird having Ved mantras inscribed on his feathers, but he was eating flesh. What does it mean? Shri Krishna replied, the huge bird having Ved mantras, Bhattji has just pointed out, Guru is a necessary factor for human beings. As per our Vedic traditions, through Guru only, we can learn some basic wisdom mantras, basic Vedic values. But you must examine who is liable to be made Guru. So that Ved mantra, that bird having Ved mantras on his feathers, but eating flesh, that showed in Kali Yuga, the Gurus would be chanting Ved mantras, but they would be, in practice, they would be like flesh eaters. The third one reported his observation, I saw a cow licking her newborn calf so much that it caused wounds over the soft skin of the newly born calf. What does that mean? Shri Krishna ji replied, this shows that parents would love their children so much, they would be caring so much that they would not spare any chance for their children to grow as a natural human being. They would make them dependent. That is why when the child comes out of their jurisdiction, he grows in the young age, he discards them. This is the Kali Yuga. Then the fourth one reported his observations. I saw 7 wells together, 6 surrounding, 1 common in between. Shri Krishna, the 6 wells were full of water, but the 7th well in between, central well, that was empty, that was dry. What does that mean? Because all the 7 wells are drawing water from the common land, from one land. How one can be dry and the other are full of water? Shri Krishna ji replied, this would be the state of brothers in Kali Yuga, that if one is a poor person, other 6 brothers are very rich, they would hardly do anything to feed that poor brother. Then the 5th one, lastly, he reported, I saw a stone rock falling from the huge mountain, and there were still stronger rocks on the way, very big trees on the way, but that small stone was not stopped. It stopped when there was a very small plant, very newborn plant was there. That huge rock stopped there. How it come that huge mountains are not able to stop that falling rock, but the small plant is able to stop that? What does that show? What is the strength of that small plant? Shri Krishna replied, in Kali Yuga, the small plant of Ishwar Bhakti would be able to stop this Natik Patan. This falling rock is showing the fall of character. No law is able to stop this fall of character. No richness is able to stop this character. Even rich people are committing crimes day in and day out. Politicians, so many big people, so many rich people, they are not deviating from criminal path. They are white collar crimes. But what can prevent you from committing crime is the small plant of Ishwar Bhakti, God worship in your heart, that can stop you from criminal activities. So this I derive, this is the core principle of Kali Yuga, that if we have Ishwar Bhakti, we can save our life. That is the supreme dharma. Patanjali Rishi says 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. Ahimsa satya aste brahmacharya aparigraha. And niyamas, shauch, santosh, tap, swadhyay, Ishwar pranidhan. But I consider this last one, Ishwar pranidhan, as the supreme value, because if we are devoted to God, if we have surrendered to God, if we are sacrificing all our belongings, we are ready to sacrifice for the sake of God, then at no cost we will never commit any falsity, we will never commit any violence, we will never deviate from the brahmacharya path, we will never deviate from aparigraha path, and we will never accumulate so much in our personal life that our brother is drying up, he is poor, he is unable to feed him, and we are enjoying. So this one feature of Ishwar Bhakti can just be a sufficient law, the supreme constitution of the land in this Kali Yuga. How about 1 year back, when I came from Tiruvannamalai last conference, I met Swamiji, Swami Atmanandji, and I was so much inspired. I promised him that we will carry this journey of Vedas, Veda knowledge. And then I started, because I was held up here in lockdown, otherwise I was planning to fix up my life there in Tiruvannamalai. But in lockdown period, I have the company of 6 commentaries of Vedas. Sainacharyaji's commentary, Swami Dayanand's Bhashya, Hindi, English, and Dr. Tulsi Ram of UK, he was a very great scholar of that time. And then Wilson, Griffith, and one Vedic scholar, Hari Sharan Siddhantalankarji. So in this way, 6-7 commentaries I purchased, and I started studying these Vedas. When I completed about 10-15, I thought of establishing it as a program. And now this program is spread over 20 countries, in addition to this India. And in India, no state is untouched. And we are posting one Veda mantra every 2 days. And what is the focus of these Vedic wisdom? What is the core of the Vedic values that I am presenting before you? The first mantra of Rig Veda, first mandal, says, Agni Mide Purohitam Yajjasya Devam Ratvijam. Yajjasya is the word here. So I am focusing on Yuga Dharma. Yajja. Yajja means sacrifice. Sacrifice, why? And the mission is God realization. When we have God realization as our focus, we never commit any crime. We never think of any crime. We can never think for a moment to spoil the heart of any one person. So God realization is our mission, and sacrifice, yajna, is our path. This simple concept of God realization, mission, and sacrificing as the yajna, as the life can save us. And this is the dharma of yoga. So now, next, there are so many mantras, and this program which we are carrying on with the participation of so many people around, all youngsters, all so many Christians, even one or two Muslims also are there who are studying Vedas with us. Everybody is appreciating Vedic wisdom, that it always focuses on sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. Every 2-3 months, every 2-3 mantras, after every 2-3 mantras, there is reference of yajna. What is this yajna? Yajna is a culture. It is not just offering oblations to the sacred fire. That is a symbolic yajna which we are performing daily. But our life must be run on a culture which is a yajnic culture, which is a culture of sacrifice. So the next month says, Agni yam yajyam advaram vishwata paribhu ati. Once a man performs yajna in his life, that means he is able to sacrifice. The God pervades him from all sides and protects him. Vishwata paribhu asi sahit deveshu gacchati. He goes on the noble path. Then one mantra says, Pavakanah Saraswati Vajebhi Vajini Yati. Saraswati is what? Saraswati, we always, whenever we talk of Saraswati, we refer to the education system with knowledge. The Saraswati is Saras, equally beneficial. Saras, equally Ras, Saman Ras. So Saraswati is that knowledge, that great knowledge, which is equally beneficial for everyone. It is not only beneficial for me. So the money, if I have 100 rupees and I am just spending it with 4 or 5 of my friends, it means that spending of 100 rupees also is Saraswati. Whatever belongings I have, whether it is material, mental, or spiritual, that must be equally enjoyed by all. If I have knowledge, I cannot keep it to myself. If I am enjoying that knowledge and I am deriving so many glories and praises from the society, it is of no use. It must be that real knowledge which must benefit everyone around. So with that mission in mind, I have started this Veda program, and I am very, very delighted that this program is now spread over more than 20 countries within a span of just 7 months. I started in May, and now after 7 months, from South Africa, the whole, group of huge group of people are joining this program. So this Vedas, I feel, focus on only one concept. The mission of life is God realization, and the path of that achievement, the path to achieve that target is sacrifice. So this, according to me, is Yuga Dharma. Now, just a small deviation, just to support this concept of sacrifice, I am referring to the concept of health. What is health? I am a yogacharya, I am health consultant also, but I have gone through the resolutions of UNO. In 1946, UNO was established, this WHO was established as a wing of UNO, and WHO gave the definition of health. It is not merely absence of diseases or infirmity, but it is the complete well-being of a person, that is physical, mental, and social. Now, the WHO stopped at 3 dimensions. Physical means I do not have any physical illness. Mental, that my mind is balanced. And social means when I go outside, nobody teases me, nobody stops me, nobody creates any hurdle, no crime is committed against me, no discrimination is there. Like in the past, in the Middle Age, we have seen the discriminations in the society. In the name of women, the people were discriminating. In the name of Dalits, the people were discriminating. All such discrimination should not be there. So WHO stopped in 3 dimensions. Then thereafter, physical, mental, and social. Then an era came in 1983, just about after 40 years of the WHO's giving this definition. In 1983, 22 nation countries of WHO recommended that spirituality should be added to the definition as a 4th dimension. How it came? Ayurveda from the old time, Ayurveda is saying what is in Hindi, in Sanskrit we call it swasth, health is swasth. The definition of swasth as per Ayurveda is swasthite iti swastha. The one who is established in his soul, who is meditating in his own self, meditating in his core energy, who is attempting to realize himself. Swami Atmanand ji says, when you focus on realizing your own self, you will realize God. First, you will realize your own self, then you will proceed to realize God. So, when we meditate on our core power, we become so empowered that no physical ailment remains, no physical ailment disturbs us, no mental imbalance is there, and we damn care about the society. We are focusing on our own power. It means we are just proceeding towards God realization. But the WHO, unfortunately, for the last about more than 40 years of this recommendation of 21 countries resolution, WHO is not inclined to accept spirituality as the fourth dimension of health. Now, then came 1998, when a special group of WHO was formed to report whether spirituality should be added to the health or not. This special group, established by WHO itself, this group also recommended that we must include spirituality, because spirituality is the basic concept of human being. A human being develops in the womb of, in the garb of his mother. When a child is developed, first of all spirit comes, then mind is developed, then slowly body is developed. So spirituality is the basis of our humanity, our human existence. Why not to focus on spirituality? What is harm? But after the special group's recommendation in 1998 also, another 13 years have passed, and WHO is not inclined to call its General Assembly to include spirituality as the fourth dimension of health. So if this spirituality is added, what would happen? I'm telling you the difference. Now you look on any government across the world, Indian government, it has about 44 or 45 ministries. One is devoted to the land, roads are constructed. The other is devoted to the water problem. The third one is devoted to the electricity. The fourth one is for railways. Then another is for aircraft. Then another is for taking care of the forests. Then another is for science. Then health ministry is there. Then education ministry is there. But all ministries are for the material development of the human beings. There is not even a single effort on the part of the government to spiritually develop its people. But Mother Earth, there is no country on this land which is devoting a single penny on the spiritual development of its people. What we are developing is only because of the Vedic wisdom that has taken birth on this land, Indian land, and that still today even we are spreading this Vedic wisdom to the whole globe. But where are the governments? Governments are spending uncountable money. Many dollars and pounds and rupees are being spent all on material development, but not a single penny is being spent on spiritual development. No arrangement is made. Dr. Gopinath ji is arranging this webinar, and Bhattji is spending his time. We are devoting our own small efforts. What the governments are doing? Can't the government have such an atmosphere in every country that people are inspired to move towards spirituality? Once the people are inspired to move towards spirituality, health problems will vanish. You have seen during the last about 8 months or 9 months, what a huge panic is being created on the name of just a small virus. Every time, any time in the past, any time in the future, we will continue to have thousands of viruses around us. But who will be saved? The person who is fixed in his soul, because the person who is spiritual, he will not eat like animals. What people are doing, they are just eating like animals. Don't have wisdom to see what is beneficial for them. We all are eating acidic food. As per naturopathy values, we are recommended just 20% acidic contents in our food daily. 80% food must be alkaline. If we switch over to this ratio, there is no question that we will be affected by any virus. So we have left our Vedic wisdom in eating. We have left our Vedic wisdom in living. We have left our Vedic wisdom in thinking. We have left our Vedic wisdom in acting. We have become self-centered. That is why we are catching all diseases and all crimes. So, according to me, the Yoga Dharma, and we must strive hard to refer it to the UNO that Yoga Dharma is, the mission is God realization, and the path of Yoga Dharma should be sacrifice. Even I may mention United Kingdom, UK's Healthcare Foundation, that is a government-sponsored private body, which has given its observations that a person rich in charitable activities, who is performing charitable activities, he is lesser prone to attract heart diseases. We can avoid heart diseases also, and we can avoid any disease according to our this Ayurvedic concept and Vedic wisdom concept. If we just move our life on sacrifice, then I think our people, the people of the globe, will be able to live peacefully. Governments should also take care of all these things. That sacrifice should be the most important inspiration from the government side for the people. This is my submission, that Yoga Dharma is a dharma of sacrifice. Dhrati kshama damo aste chaucham indriya nigraha dhi vidya satyam akarodha dashakam dharma lakshanam. All these are focusing on sacrifice. We are being taught, we have been taught in the past by our rishis and saints to sacrifice for the sake of our family, to sacrifice for the sake of our society, our nation, and the whole globe. So I invite all of you to bless this Veda study program and to streamline the concept of this Yoga Dharma webinar into a small proposal referred to the UNO. Dr. Bhattji can easily help us. I am in Delhi, I can meet him, and we can draft a proposal of this webinar. So many good lectures. Right now, Sebastian Saab was also referring to the Kal. What is Kal? Kal is the Karamphal principle. Kal is regulated by our Karamphal principle. I commit one karma here, and the Kal carries it. And Kal carries it in its treasurer. And then revert back to me, that Kal comes to me again in the form of a phal. My karma comes back to me as a return gift. This we should understand. We are all under the control of Kal. Kal is the God itself. This Daveji has proved it from Atharveda. Kal Ishwar hai. So we must proceed with this proposal that Yoga Dharma should be the guiding force for our governments also. Yoga Dharma should reach, this concept should reach UNO also, that kindly inspire all citizens of the globe for this Yoga Dharma concept. That is all my submissions. Thank you.
So thank you, Vimal Bhattji, and I think you have highly contributed to our ongoing dialogue on Dharma, Yoga Dharma, and its essentiality in translating this Dharma in the present contemporary scenario, how it can be, because after analyzing Dharma, that Pandavas, Krishna or Pandavas, that dialogue, so it has in a very higher manner, it has brought out the characteristics of Kali Yuga, and how it can be confronted with the calamities of Kali Yuga, how it can be confronted with. So it is in a few words you have brought out in a very higher level. And you said that Bhakti, after all this dialogue, that a small plant and that big rock coming down is stopped with that small plant. So in Kali Yuga, all the scriptures say that it is bhakti and the Nama Sankirtanam, etc. But you have rightly pointed out, a guru is essential. A guru is essential to learn Veda. What is Veda? Not in the textual. Whatever is written in text, not Veda. That's supreme knowledge. That supreme knowledge related to that time and space dimension is to be learned from such a Paramaguru, Sadguru. Then only we can confront, get over the calamities. So therefore, another thing, your pursuit, your mission, you have taken up as the dissemination of Veda. And your interpretations, daily, when it comes to my, WhatsApp, I read it. So you have pointed out that sacrifice, yajna, sacrifice. You have explained not in that traditional modes, this and that. Sacrifice is sacrificing whatever you have to others, distributing to others, be with others. And yajna is not doing this or that. That sacrifice, yajna should be a culture. It is very much embedded in our tradition, this culture of yajna, culture of sacrifice. The old narratives in scriptures, Puranas, we come across this culture. So if these values can be retrieved, these values can be projected in such a fashion as you do at present. This is what we have been deliberating upon the past days, and this is what precisely you have put forward. So as we have already decided, this can be, Batsar is in Delhi, you are in Delhi, our Professor Balram Singh is in USA, but it doesn't make any difference. That difference, that, in the present context, globe, the distance is not at all a problem. Therefore, I feel that all these things can be put together. Your valuable exposition can be, part of this ongoing discourse, and we are highly thankful to you. We are highly thankful to you, and it is very good that all such right-minded people could come together. It is a great thing of this conference. All the right-minded people could come together, and we are thankful to your presentation. We are highly thankful to you, and anybody wants to make some observation or this, our next speaker is Rajani Jairam. After that, we have to go for overview of the conference, etc., for which Professor Balram Singh is also waiting for. So if somebody wants to make a focused observation, please.
Professor Dave.
At the end of the Bhagavad Gita, after karma and jnana yoga, Bhagavan says, "Man manavo mad bhakto mad yaji mam namaskaru." And not only that, he says, "Aham sarva yagnanam bhoktaha prabhu evacha." So sacrifice and devotion, sacrifice of whatever you like, I think is the easiest path. Thank you very much.
Professor Gopinath, I would like to say one thing, that please share the number of Advocate Vimal Wadhwanji,
Please.
so that we can also get the benefit of that, as we are in Delhi.
Please. Hello, please.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Share the number of Advocate Vimalji. I'm putting up in Delhi so that we can get the benefit of.
Okay. He will share with you the number, his telephone number. He will share with you.
And wonderful talk done by Advocate.
So, Professor Gaudam Patel, you want to make any observation? Professor Gaudam Patel, you want to make an observation?
Is he here?
He's. I think he is with us. Balramji, you want to make any observation?
Yes, I do have an observation. It's a wonderful talk, by the way. Really enjoyed every word of it. The only thing to consider in terms of planning, and I think we can discuss this more either in the overview or later, is that to expect a government or ruler group to do this kind is contradictory. It's self-contradictory because a system, anybody who is governed a system would not change it. To make them to change, it will have to be only in their system. And so I have said this before, even Ram couldn't kill Ravana as a king. He had to get out of the system. Even though his father was a Chakravarti king, but he couldn't do anything to Ravana. And Ram has to get out into the jungles and do what needed to be done. And I think this is very important to understand the dharma. That's why our sages and rishis, they get out of the system. They never are part of the system, because the moment you are part of the system, you are always going to, in this is just the nature, it's a dharma of anybody to sustain that, whatever the system is. And so one has to think about that. That's the only observation I have right now.
Thank you. Because, yeah, always it is to be very much, it's a reality, not considered. It is a reality also. Yeah. So, with this, shall we proceed to next presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. So, let me invite Professor Rajani Jairam. I hope she is present. Rajani.
Sir, good evening. I'm present, but my connection is very unstable. So I would
you need not to switch on your video.
Yes,
And Professor Rajani Jairam, most of us know that she is a professor in the Department of Sanskrit, Jain University, Bangalore. And she also has chosen this as this pursuit of philosophy in various dimensions, in its practical as well as in theoretical, being rooted in Sanskrit literature, etc. She has a very good knowledge and vision of all these concepts. Therefore, she writes a lot and organizes programs so as to illuminate her students, colleagues, general public in this respect. So we are thankful to you for having with us. Please make your presentation, Rajani Jairam.
Thank you, Professor Gopinath. Good evening, enlightened scholars, learned colleagues, delegates, and invitees. Start off with a shloka from Bhartruhari. My humble obeisance to the peaceful eternal majesty residing in the heart of one and all, perceptible by self-experience. I set the note for the experiential learning part of our knowledge. Dharma. As we have been speaking through many discourses, I was not able to attend many due to my preoccupation at the university. But whatever I heard today, I understand that all of the scholars here would like to have dharma from an experiential perspective, and rather than the theory part of it, they would like to apply it in the day-to-day life and the life beyond that. Well, thinking about dharma from the old tradition with the sages of yore, the mantra drashtaras, it's very evident that they transmitted dharma to the Antevasins by witnessing the dharma. Hence, they got the name mantra drashtaras. Well, from this, we understand that in their perspective, dharma was something exceptional which had to be transmitted to the common man in the society. A question would naturally arise as to what the sages witnessed, how they witnessed them. From a careful reflection on the Vedic passages, it appears that they witnessed the nature or the characteristic property of the various objects of the universe, whether animate or inanimate. This formed their realization of dharma, which they transmitted through the oral traditions to later generations through Vedic mantras. The words dharma and dharman have had a checkered history as far as their usage in Indian literature is concerned. In the earlier period, these meant support, truth, duty, manner, quality, or characteristic. But in course of time, they had expanded meaning like religion, ethics, good works, customary observances, and many more. In literature, if we think of the word dharma, the generic term always means to sustain what was, what is, and what will be. It is the nature or the characteristic or a specific meaning based on realization. Well, the best example being Mitravarunatvat Paridhattam Dhruvena Dharmana. May the divine pair Mitravaruna sustain thee with inviolable character. The uniqueness of Sanatana Dharma, which we Indians believe in and are trained to practice, is its universality. These cardinal features confer upon it the universal character. The three are, however, mutually exclusive. In fact, they nourish one another rather than being conflicting with each other. In the Brihadaranyaka, not for the sake of gods, my beloved, or the gods worshipped, but for the sake of self, not for the sake of the Vedas, my beloved, or the Vedas revered, but for the sake of self. This Vedic idea, which is trans-Vedic nevertheless, couched in those immortal love talks of Yagnavalkya and Maitreyi, constitutes the very foundation of Sanatana Dharma. The self, which is the same and yet not the same as the ego, is here the object of ultimate value. Therefore, the self and not the world becomes the determinant of all dharma. It is this feature that accounts for the naturalness of Sanatana Dharma and makes it adherent, amusingly independent of all societal constructs in the exercise of religious choices. Vivekananda, the greatest saint India has seen, told in a point blank manner, no two persons have the same mind or the same body. No two persons have the same religion. Multiplicity of Hindu gods and myriad forms of their worship is a fierce expression of this primacy of self in the determination of dharma. The primacy of the self requires and in fact engenders a striking societal imperative, that is liberty. Naturalness expresses itself through liberty, and liberty nurtures naturalness. All reformations within Sanatana Dharma have had this idea for their pivot. Again, Vivekananda continued to say, liberty is our natural right to be allowed to use our own body, intelligence, or wealth according to our will without doing harm to any other person. This is, of course, the basic premise of Dharma. To advance towards freedom, physical, mental, and spiritual, and help others to do so, it is the supreme prize of a human being. These social rules which stand in the way of the unfoldment of this freedom are injurious, and steps should be taken to destroy them speedily. Those institutions should be encouraged by which men advance in the path of freedom. This is what the greatest sage India has seen, has told all of us to follow. Freedom, naturality, and of course, caring for the self. It may be mentioned in the passing that this principle stands at the root of the Swakarma concept elaborated in the Bhagavad Gita. All beautiful, glorious, and mighty creations, springing as they do from a spark of my splendor, are to thee objects of worshipful meditation, says the Gita. In this masterstroke of a verse, Krishna has universalized the culture of Sanatana Dharma, which is definitely beyond the realm of time, and space. The ripe civilizational idea that aesthetic experience is a religious exercise expressly stated in the verse quoted has made art and religion the same thing in the Indian context. Our gods and goddesses from Rama and Krishna to Hanuman and Draupadi are characters from our literary classics and marvelous phenomenon of the Indian universality. The temples doubling as auditoria for performing arts is a corollary of this great phenomenon. The implication of this, needless to say, are enormous. The metamorphosis of religious instinct into aesthetic sensibility, of the egotistic into the universal, becomes here simply a matter of course. Therefore, it abounds every human being to get out of the six human flaws because of which they are struggling and suffering. Nidra Tantra, Bhayakrodam, Alasyam, Dirghasutrata. These are the six things which we essentially have to get out of. The worship, in addition to art experience, the celebration of natural geography, the worship of the great rivers, the great mountains, the centers of pilgrimage, the worship of sages of yore, Vyasa, Vishwamitra, Ramana Maharshi, Ramakrishna, all these things alongside the promoting of reverence for nature is perennial concept which renews the faith in the grandest ideals of dharma being eternal ever and anon in the Indian context. Examination of the nature of self, though guided by scriptural authority, is quite independent of it. It derives its authority from being experiential as a matter of fact. Please observe that word experiential, on which a greater emphasis has been laid by Shankara in his Brahma Sutra Bhashya. The question is religion to justify itself by the discoveries of reason through which every other science justifies itself? I am reminded of the adage that where science ends, philosophy begins. Are the same methods of investigation that we apply to sciences and knowledge outside to be applied to science of religion? In my opinion, definitely it is so. If a religion is destroyed by such investigations, it was then all the time useless, unworthy, superstitious, and the sooner it goes, the better. I'm thoroughly convinced that its destruction would be the best thing that would happen. If there is one religion that can survive rigorous examination, ravages of time, is definitely the Sanatana Dharma. Again, I emphasize this is the reason why I say Dharma is beyond the realm of time and space. The Avasthanatraya Prakriya of Vedanta, contained mainly in the Brihadaranyaka and Chandogya Upanishads, emphasized especially in the Karikas of Gaudapada and clarified accessibly in the path-breaking work of Sachidanandra Saraswati, is the truest exemplar of scientific robustness in the examination of ultimate reality, that is, Brahma Jignasya. Detailing the methodology is beyond the scope of my talk. Thanks to the Vedantic analysis, Sanatana Dharma is extricated from the web of beliefs and dogmas which, in spite of their benefits for the commoner, are unfulfilling to the intellectually robust. Solace comes from truth, and from truth that it is accessible. These three together make Sanatana Dharma what it is: benign and accommodative, uplifting and joy giving, strong and perennial. All beings are naturally driven by a quest after happiness. Unfailing happiness cannot be attained without righteous conduct. Therefore, righteous conduct is obligatory for all, says Vakbhata. Work in consonance with one's natural productivity, meditation upon the self, and worship of exalted beauty are the three sources of unfailing happiness. Of course, there can hardly be any doubt that Vedas are a repository of profound knowledge since they are based on the actual realization of dharma by the sages. Again, I emphasize on the concept of character building and man making, which was later emphasized by Vivekananda. Though Vedas were written in the archaic language, the sages of today brought them to every home, be it in the local or the regional language. The essence of the living tradition of India were actually brought to every home, to every individual, and this is this robustness which has made us mentally strong today. The oldest texts dealing directly with dharma, the Dharma Sutras, were capable of telling something to the scholarly people. Though these works are these works are part of only being seen as a class to transform the ancient laws, they have given us the direction and the universal character. The treatises help us in understanding dharma at the intellectual level, and it is the duty of every citizen to practice and bring them to the realistic perspective. It is the song celestial or the Bhagavad Gita which is flooded with thoughts and which can bring these thoughts into action, because every dream has to be translated and transformed into a reality, albeit it remains only a dream. Dharma as a mental object. Whatever is born by the mind at a time constitutes its dharma during that dharma. I am reminded of the conversation between Bhima, Draupadi, and Yudhishthira in the Vanaparva of Mahabharata, when Bhima says, whatever is his dharma, let us pay him in that dharma with respect to Duryodhana, and this is strongly refuted by the dharmic brother Yudhishthira. Just as the five senses, our panchendriyas, are there, so are the gnanendriyas, and probably with the five senses, the sixth sense is dharma. Well, there are so many things in vogue which have come today, like the punya dharma, the papa dharma, the sukha dharma, the dukkha dharma, ariya dharma, anariya dharma, etc., etc., according to the way people lead their lives. Prudence requires that one should carry in one's mind mental factors that are wholesome, beneficial, and advantageous. This, for obvious reasons, is for one's own good. Hence, the word dharma can be used in an exclusively good sense as well as the opposite of that being adharma. Is dharma a duty only? Well, whatever proves fit to be carried out through the mind, through the body, or in action definitely is one's duty. Conversely, whatever is not fit to be carried out by